Hi, everybody. Happy Sabbath. Thank you. Let's see. There we go. Now I'm big. I'm going to start with a silent prayer. Amen. Well, everybody, in good order of, obeying the words of our elders to continue the topic of discussion of menstruation, we are going to talk about how anyone would be able to identify with a period. So as men, I'm going to try and relate the process that women go through in terms that you might understand, and then as well kind of share some of the things that we've been passing back and forth, sharing with each other, the different links and videos and whatnot. And then the kind of the survey or research project of a sort that with the help of 11 wonderful ladies, women, people, I'm still conditioning myself to not genderize, but I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just the start of something that I think has a really great likelihood of impacting a lot of women positively, a lot of individuals who deal with periods and menstruation all around the world, no matter what. And also to kind of share what other experiences are around the world, how the women that I spoke to, the friends that I spoke to, the links that I read, the blog articles I was pointed towards, the videos, how everybody's experience is very unique and also very helpful in the big scheme of understanding one to another. So as we kind of go on, if there's anything that you're not quite sure of, that maybe you didn't hear me correctly, or maybe you're just not familiar with that term, I do encourage anybody to speak up, to say, to interrupt me, say, Alyssa, I don't understand, or can you explain this, or well, what about this? And instead of typing it, I'd prefer just somebody to interrupt me. I'm just better that way. Sometimes I can see the text, sometimes not so well. The first, I'm going to go over the three things that Elder Tess asked us to keep in mind. These were her 3 requests from last night, her Sabbath study. To keep focus on menstruation, to give women the respect that that we need to show everyone. This is there's a lot of diligence that we need to pay, honor half of the world's population that I think we're starting to realize we've kind of marginalized, because for whatever reason we've chose to abide in a man's world, in creating systems preferential to men, and really not necessarily understanding or seeking to understand the plight of women, or even trans people and their experiences. So it's important to keep focus on this especially since Elder Parmender put it into our prophetic study last week. So instead of us jumping on different topics of study, to really focus in on this until it's time to to focus on something else, until everybody kind of has a good grasp, a good handle on not just the topic, but also how this translates into everyday interactions with one to another, to truly be equal with everyone, and to have a level of respect for oneself also means giving another person that respect as well. So the number 2 she said was to remember the lines of the 2 streams of information. To remember the lines in general, but also the really important one in the study of menstruation is that we've had these 2 streams of information. We've had a lot of exposure to false ideas, to false scientific, I say kind of scientific because they're not necessarily based in science, but just what some people would say, oh yeah, that sounds right. Like some of the things that Elder Tess brought to light yesterday about like the couple things that stick in my mind was the ice cube versus hot water. Super, super cold water weighing less than super hot water, than boiling water. I think the people who made the packaging for these periods, who put this little like scientific fact or whatever, really didn't research, because that's not true. But there's so many things like that we've been exposed to all our life that we perpetuate, really, without giving it much. It's like our fast brain speaks before our slow brain processes and says, is that even a true statement? Is that something that I need to not say? I need to work that out. I need to fact check myself. And there's so much to learn and to unlearn. So the third thing that she asked us to do was to handle ourselves appropriately, handle ourselves wisely, is how she put it, especially on social media. The biggest thing is to, again, with the 2 lines or the 2 streams, is to stop spreading misinformation or disinformation that we're receiving that we don't realize is disinformation, and we're passing that on as though it's true. Because we have influence, and we have an obligation to the truth, is kind of how it makes the most sense to me. And if we are repeating things that others have said that just make sense to us without us actually researching things or finding the answers for ourselves, it's like I can't remember which Miller rule. If we're leaning on the opinions or the education of others and their commentary on anything, then we're not honoring our mission as Bible scholars, as Christ disciples. Sorry, now I'm gonna get a little tickle in my throat. And we need to step back and be mindful of the situation that we've put ourselves in, that we find ourselves, whatever that might look like online. And maybe we need to delete some posts. Maybe we need to put some edits and say, I need to correct myself. I'll get some water. but it's important to stop spreading disinformation. She also made this point of how we talk about these topics, these issues. We might have a clinical approach in our handling of this of whatever it is that we're studying or presenting. We might have a sterile clinical, have the specific names for things, but to also keep in mind that what we're speaking about, especially with trans individuals, just being respectful of while we're speaking about, this very clinical experience of what the body and what the emotions are doing, this gender identity, that this is a very real, not just experience, it's a very real process. It's a very real, what we have intellectual knowledge of, there are others who have physical experiential knowledge. And we need to, I guess, honor the process of others. And I've shown this really great clip, and I can't remember the woman's name, or maybe I don't remember the woman's name, but it seemed like she was doing a really short snippet. Wendy, this is the one that you shared with me of this woman. So if you don't mind maybe posting that link in the chat or in the Bible group. The woman was saying that we can't love our neighbor and say we reject their experience. It doesn't make any sense. We can't say to a person who is telling us, or who we're trying to understand as somebody different to ourselves, somebody who's non-binary, who identifies as queer or bisexual, or on some level of crossover in the trans world. We can't say, no, your experience isn't right. I'm going to tell you what is right. And we've done that for a really long time as conservative Christians, conservative Muslims, conservative Jews, maybe even in many other conservative versions of religions or philosophies. These people are also marginalized because just society for so long has said men and women look like this, act like this. Anything that pertains to a woman, we're going to just put this into a big black box and say it's a mystery, and go there as rarely as possible, and study anything that's true about men, because they're the most superior of the species anyway. So we're going to apply what's true for them. I'm thinking scientifically within research. This has been true for so long, that while the predominant body of research is made up of male test subjects, there's still inferences made of, oh, okay, well, that'll be the same for women. And if it's not the same, it must be in their head. So these are a lot of the misconceptions, a lot of the angst that we're going to be facing. And we need to remember that we're stewards for those without a voice, for the marginalized, for the oppressed of some one way or another. For the fake oppressed, the ones that are claiming to be oppressed by equality. I think that's a different type of label. But these are all things to keep in mind going forward. Did somebody have something to say? I thought I heard something. Sorry. So I'm going to start on this side of the board first before I go into the discussion of the kind of the research that I asked everybody on the big Bible chat to consider and to kind of participate in with me. I'm grateful for those that did. If any more had responded, I think it would have been overwhelming for me. So I'm grateful for the ones that did. But first, we're going to frame this period cycle menstruation. You know, just looking at it as a snapshot, just as a timeline almost. And this is just kind of how we draw lines, but this is just how I'm applying it to anyone who has a uterus, anyone who goes through menstruation. If the person either does choose, you know, like a trans person during this puberty time, they can, if they have the male parts, but they identify as female, they have the option of blocking the puberty hormones so they don't transition into a female, because that would be mortifying to them because their identity is male. So if they were to transition fully into a female and now start bleeding, every month that would create a crisis for them. I think it's referred to as dysmorphia, or maybe I'm wrong. But a mental, I guess a mental crisis where you feel one way, but you have a different experience and you have absolutely no control over it. Body dysmorphia is, I think, the term I was thinking of. But just any person's life, you know, we begin as a clump of cells at age 0, and then we go through our adolescence fairly equal. I think the only thing we realize is different, you know, among us as kids is the way that we go to the bathroom. I remember in preschool being outside for recess, and this little boy just goes to the bathroom against the fence by the sandbox, and the teacher is like, "Oh no, let's not do that." And he says, "Well, this is what I do at home." And it was so, like, you know, it didn't faze anybody really, because we're like, "Oh, what kind of part do you have?" "Oh, okay." That's interesting. That's really cool that you can, you know, have the freedom that you have as a guy. I got to go through all this process of, you know, tearing down my clothes. But especially when women, well, anyway, I'm not going to go there. So we have this non-sexualized identity, you know, whether that's, I don't even know if, well, I think as a kid I was aware that I was a female, of course, but I don't think I had any, like, I mean, you played with whoever you got along with, you know. It wasn't, oh, you've got to only play with the girls. And I know that some Adventists in particular really have adhered to girls are only to be with girls, boys are only to be with boys. The only way that the two really need to come together is for courtship. And I think we've come to the realization that that's more of a limitation. That's more of a hindrance on our development as people, as a social group of people too. How we maybe not totally know how to talk to these, to other sexes, to other people, just in general, because we've kept ourselves so contained within. And so now we're seeing, okay, we've got to prepare ourselves for the world who doesn't necessarily look or think like us, and to know that that's okay, and not just to know it ourselves, but to to eat that little book means to digest the message and to make this message a living part of your life. So, and how it affects everyone around you. So if you have this outlook as a child of some sort of insecurity, or you have an abusive situation, these are all very they disrupt this hormonal transition, because now you're kind of forcing that child into experiences that I don't think our children are really able or capable of having. I mean, period is usually the first sign of womanhood, so to speak. This would be the earliest age that a woman could be married off in a lot of cultures. And so I kind of got off on a tangent there, but the main thing that I was trying to get at is that we have these times in our developmental time. So our brain right here is still very plastic. It's still being formed. We're very impressionable, and so we pick up on cues from our family, from society, from school, church, however we're around people. And so that's the first 11 to 13 years of just any child's life before hormones start to affect the development after that. And for those who have the female parts, they're going to develop periods. For those who have male parts, they're going to have a different sort of puberty experience. I was almost trying to not necessarily equate the period with like how men change, or how guys change during this time. I think it's marked by spontaneous emissions. The boys are a lot more aware of their penis and its function, and how the thoughts and the images that a person sees, suggestions, will create these physiological changes. But there's not pain associated with it. There's not a crippling effect that has on a man's life. Whereas a period, even if a woman a menstruator doesn't have pain associated with that period, there's still destruction in some way, because here, as a normal child, as a prepubescent child, as a girl, you're not having to worry about I got to pack pads or tampons to go to play at the park today. Both sexes are pretty equal during that time. They don't have anything to do with their body. I don't think that's that takes priority one over the other. That the period does during this time where the hormones are really, or different type of hormones, I guess, are surging through the bodies of these teenagers, and even 11. I don't know if they're considered tweens, but back when I was in grade school, so that would have been like the 80s, there seemed to be, the 80s and early 90s, it seemed to be something that I remember about that time hearing of, because one of my classmates, I think she was 10, she started her period. And my dad, he's a chiropractor, and he was always like my family doctor. I didn't have an MD, I had my dad. So I just asked him, why was she starting her period so young? And mainly because I was like, is this what I have to look forward to now, or not? And there seemed to be something that he had read about the hormones and the cow milk and the meat and all of that affecting the body. But before we go there into the realm of all the things that can affect the body, I want us to focus on just trying to understand this period process, just so that we can demystify it. We can, it's not seen as a taboo subject, as something to run from and hide from, something that men are ignorant on. Mm-hmm. This needs to be something that that everybody's kind of an equal participant of. But the transition of into male versus female during this adolescent hormonal shift time is really when a female's life, or not a gender identifying female, but with the shell, the female shell, person who has a female shell, the female, parts, the genetics, their whole life is disrupted for the next 29 to 32 years. Even those women who said, who responded to my request of kind of sharing their period stories, there were a couple that said that they really didn't have anything to share with me. They didn't have pain, they didn't feel pain or experience pain. It didn't interrupt their life at all. I don't necessarily believe you, with all due respect, because you're no longer the same carefree kid back here now. You may not have pain, you may not have personally experienced shame, because you learn to manage, like, how to keep it to yourself, how to hide, your period products, the pads, the tampons. Whether you had pain or not, you might have learned how to medicate, or just how to grin and bear it and keep going, suck it up. There's all kinds of different ways of mitigating and managing the menstruation. But so this is where I say I don't believe a person that says, I didn't have any problems, and okay, so I can believe that, but at the same time know that there's no way that it couldn't have not disrupted your life on some level. There are so many stories that I heard from within the movement, as well as in my independent research of articles and stories. There were bleed throughs. Women had accidents. They didn't fully prepare, or they were plenty prepared, but their flow was just too much. They were losing too much blood, so they soaked through everything. I mean, and just the mental process of, I'm bleeding every month. Like, this is, I guess you can, just get used to it and say, oh, that's just my life. But in contrast to a guy's experience, it's like, well, okay. I mean, I can understand how women can buy into the conservative story of, women being accursed, of, whatever pain or whatever experience that you have that's unpleasant, well, you deserved that because, you brought all of this sin upon us, women. It's all your fault. Mm-hmm. So we carry that with us every month, or at least I think on some level the collective psyche does, just because it happens to everyone born with a female shell. And maybe not everybody, there are exceptions, but very, very rare. But so I want to kind of draw this point to your attention that the female has these insane, relative term, insane, swings of hormones and experiences. Now they have to be careful of boys because they've been told they're going to get pregnant now, and if they go near them or touch them or kiss them, or your tampon's going to end your virginity. So there's this time of just where you're trying to get your own bearings of the situation. And once you have those bearings of your own situation, then society says, well, you're not a true woman until you're married and you're having kids. And do men have that option? No. If they did have that option, would their whole lives change, or would they make their lives to fit their situation? And I think we're starting to see that the way our society is constructed is pretty advantageous for a non-self-aware male. You can knock up girls anytime you want to, have a bunch of babies that you don't have to care for because that's a woman's issue, and I can just be free to have my career and excel all I want to. I mean, there's really very few limitations on men compared to, okay, if I start my period here and my my parents send me to college, or I get the chance to go to college, or even just high school, now I've got to worry though about pregnancy, because if that happens, then, well, that ruins the rest of my life. In not so many words, but it changes, maybe not ruins the right word for everybody, but it drastically changes the trajectory of that person's life. Just having a kid, because you're not taught, this is how you understand the hormone cycle. Let's understand how to put a condom on. Let's give you the option of birth control, of female birth control, not just male birth control, but how to use male birth control. So all of this is just pressure on the shoulders, on the backs of women, that we just grin and bear it. We just go through our lives, and regardless of how they're impacted, no matter how much our plan for ourselves gets changed, we are, we have these rules, these limitations that we're constrained by. The work opportunities. Some places don't like to employ women because they don't want to, pay for the woman to miss work for so long during pregnancy or postpartum. I don't think you're going to find as much in today's world, but we know of like authoritarian nations, countries, they still, that's just how they operate. But so for about 30 years, we have this exposure to hormones, to these monthly cycles. They may or may not be regular. They may or may not be predictable. They may or may not be easy or painful. And we might not have any hiccups with it, but it's still a part of our daily life. We still have to, I mean, swimming was one of the biggest ones that I heard most often from women, or being in water sport of some kind, and having the period, because now you've got to shift everything. If you only wear, well, I might get into that on a different tangent, because I want to kind of get into some of the personal, the menstruation management products that women have access to, and how they work. But there's an equal part of the woman's life, just about, that one of the respondents said that this was the time that she found real deliverance. I thought that was a really great way of looking at this postmenopausal time in a woman's life, where the period ends, where there's an end to it's the time when a woman can get pregnant, unless by a miracle. But the almost equal time of having these raging, cycling hormones, and a life that's kind of heavily influenced by them, and then a little bit less, but maybe about the same, of this. This is assuming a 72-year life cycle for a woman. I think this is the average life expectancy of women at a certain measurement. This is the UN women.org, where I got this, how I actually calculated that this was, their data was based on time frame of a 72-year life, was because they said that during this period of time, during this portion of a menstruator's life, this is going to equate to about 6 years of menstruating. And the way the way that the math works is that if 6 years of a person's life is spent menstruating, spent just bleeding, then it has to be 72 hours, 72 years for this person's life that they calculated. So I don't know if that average has changed or not, but we're still looking at roughly 6 years of a person's life that is devoted to period maintenance and management, and I guess just mitigating this hormonal part of the person's life. I actually can't say that hormones only exist in this portion of the life, because of course there are plenty of hormones in this portion, and there are also plenty of hormones in this portion of a woman's life. A man's life too, they actually go through their own form of menopause. It's called andropause. So they have a lot of the same hormones that a woman has, but of course they experience things differently. They too can have, it's not PMS, it's called something else that I can't think of right now, but there is a scientific understanding that men go through these periodic cycles of hormone release, and I think that's just going to be, you know, how we need to start looking at everybody. Like, everybody is not fitting the standard model that we've tried to conform everybody into. So we have to look at everybody kind of on an individual basis. And so when we look at having half or about the same amount of years without the period, without menstruating, having real deliverance, as one of the women stated, one of the menstruating people I talked to, she was saying that this, well, actually not she, the people that I've talked to that have gone through menopause have, whether natural menopause or by having a hysterectomy, surgical procedure to remove the uterus, or, you know, any sort of, I think like having your tubes tied. No, you still have periods with tubes tied, but there's some other surgical medical procedures that, I'm thinking of endometriosis for some reason, but there are certain things that that a woman, or that a person in a female shell experiences, that gosh, my train of thought just totally derailed.
They have a good time after they have the, they're happy after the procedure.
Yeah, thanks. Because there's no longer this, I mean, I've heard it mentioned, somebody that I used to, well, I guess I'm still friends with them in Texas, calling this time of their life the sane and rational, and the time, something like, this is when I became a man, is essentially what this person was saying. And being a cis female, a female in both gender identity and physical characteristics, she was happy that she was more like a man. She finally reached that stage of manhood, is kind of what I remember her saying. And it's kind of true in a really sexist way of looking at it, where you know, I guess as a species, we have to have, I mean, 6 years. If you were to bleed 6 years straight, that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to get pregnant. I mean, this is just a miraculously set up process. It's just absolutely beautiful, painful, but beautiful, painful for some. And, you know, to have these different times demarcated within our lives, to where you have all these different experiences. And as one of the contributors to the study said, that she felt a celebration when she got her period. And it was a time to, for her, she was going through a bunch of things all at once. And it was, you know, end of school, her, maybe not her birthday, but something else that she just felt it was just a huge celebration for. And man, I did not share in that experience personally. And a lot of the other, I don't, for a while it seemed 50-50, with some having 50% having in the easy breezy category, and then 50% having experienced pain. So you know, I don't want to say, I mean, this is my spread. There's actually more people that didn't have as much pain that I spoke to, but of the ones that did, it really did. So it's actually not 50-50 at all. It's not an even spread, but I'll get into that a little bit. So I guess I want to try and explain to like how this might feel, so a guy can understand the period pain can be. So I'll talk about my first experience. And one of the reasons why women associate or call their period having stomach cramps or stomach pains is because this really ill-defined portion of their tummy area, you know, around their pelvis, but they're not necessarily conditioned to speak about these words because we've sexualized the body, the human anatomy. So we use these general, you know, areas, your tummy, to speak about a vast number of things. But having just almost like this feeling of being gut punched, just over and over, at random times, you know, like when I think that, okay, the pain's going away, nope, we got another gut punch. I mean, so if a guy really thinks about being gut punched, or maybe they have been, that's somewhat of an understanding of what a period can be for some women. And if a guy is successful in having that mind of having that idea in his mind of what that might feel like. Now, imagine that you're being gut punched throughout the day, sometimes throughout the night as well. Not just gut punched, but you know, like the gut punch goes through the wall of, you know, the belly and just grabs a hold. Okay, I'm glad that gut punches was something that can be a commonality or a common way of, not common, but just a way of looking at it for a guy. You know, so having the gut punched, but the hand going into the body and just squeezing down on those organs. And then try and go through your day normally, like, you know, nothing's wrong. Like you've just ridden a bicycle or drawn a picture or talked with your friend. I mean, there's such a strong taboo over periods affecting a person's life. You don't talk about it. You don't bring it up. You don't mention your. You want it to be as private and as far away from public awareness as possible. And so, as a guy having these gut punches, and you know, imagine that you're like in this room, and people are talking to you, trying to tell you things, and you're needing to remember them, and you know, it's just sometimes it's just really hard to focus because you're dealing with these punches, and you know, this is how your life is. Oh, you got baseball practice afterwards? Oh, sure, I feel fine. I've got plenty of stamina to run a mile, and you know, I can ignore these gut punches, and some can, and some have, and some do, and others are not. And so this is kind of the start of empathy making, of how we can kind of put ourselves in the shoes of someone else, of trying to understand their experience for itself on its own merit, rather than us saying, or just anybody saying, oh no, you shouldn't be having that experience, or don't tell me about that experience, or you know, oh, we don't talk about that. I mean, there's all kinds, or being made fun of, or having jokes told over about you over these gut punches. There's, oh, look at Richard. He's not man enough to kick a football and be gut punched at the same time. I mean, this is kind of the male equivalent. I'm creating a scenario in our minds of, if this were to happen to guys, how it would impact them, one, and for them to start to think, okay, if this is how I would be affected in my life, in my day-to-day life as a man, what can I do on behalf of females, whether gender identity or biological, and help support this life process. I mean, this is like, at restaurants, Indian restaurants in particular, you'll see these dishes of, I think they're fennel seeds with some kind of like sugary coating, I think, but it's supposed to be like a digestive or a post-meal thing. So just to help freshen your breath, and then to kind of help mitigate the gas that you've just eaten, or that will be created from the great meal that you've eaten. And if there was some kind of way to normalize, so we've normalized gaseous functions by having something available, just like that Indian restaurant having those that herbal. If we can do that in the workplace, I was talking with Sakai, and she's got a lot of hindrances in the construction in the workplace of, pregnant women not having construction harnesses that support for a pregnant woman. There's in male-dominated workplaces, there's maybe not even a female-only or designated bathroom. So you're sharing a bathroom with all these people, and now this is not just associated with a male-dominated workplace. Now, what I'm about to say is also going to have implications with period poverty, but not having, well, not just period poverty, but not having a private, safe space to manage your period creates a lot of anxiety. So for a lot of women that have these jobs where it's predominantly a male-driven employment, they have to change their work schedule because they've got to either go home throughout the day and change their paths, or they're too embarrassed. So there's too much stigma, so they just stay at home for the 3 days to a week that they have their period. So there's a lot of things to think about. So as a guy, thinking about how to help my equals, my friends of this female body, of this female body biology, I can ask for the workplace to supply pads or tampons, just like some work environments or some places of work, or even just restaurants or restrooms at different restaurants or bars will have condom vending machines. Well, we had some tampon vending machines for a while. I have not seen those in so long. So, you know, to have a proactive approach to how can we, whatever our situation is with work, how can we make it more inclusive for those of the opposite sex? How can we, you know, so guys have taken care of themselves for hundreds of years. They have made a work situation tailored to their needs. Even, well, I was going to go off on the 50s, and the show Mad Men kind of paints this picture of guys hiring hot secretaries so they could have their side piece. I mean, you know, so men have really tailored their work environment to their whims. And it's time for us to do that for ourselves. And Sakai also made really good points about it's time for women to be women in the workplace rather than women trying to act as men. And I think I understand that in a sense of, you know, where we are just putting up with whatever conditions we are given and just, you know, pushing our issues down and not creating a point of distraction for anybody else or a point of attention to be drawn to us. So I'm just going to, you know, stay in my little corner, and that's kind of being a man in the workplace, because as a woman, as a person who menstruates, you really need to have these. I mean, I think of the Amazon employees that don't really have good bathroom break, you know, times, or they get penalties for their bathroom breaks if they go too long. Women having to, you know, to deal with their cycles with that, and mitigating, you know, tampons and pads, and, or, you know, oh, I'm having a bleed through moment, so I've got to run a mile to the bathroom, and by the time I get there, my pants are going to be, you know, red in parts. There's all kinds of things that we need to kind of open our eyes to and say, all right, we need to do this better. And one of the first things is the things to do better is to end the stigma, period. This was the name of a really great infographic that Penny shared in both the local Lambert chat and then the Bible chat. And is a great infographic. It breaks down the issues that women face, how it affects their lives, and what we can do about it, action steps that we can take. So some of the statistics that they shared was that 12.8% of adults and children with periods in the world are in poverty. So I think the world is now like 7.4 billion is the latest number. That might have been an old number that I heard recently. 12.8% of adults and children with periods in the world are in poverty. So that equates to, I mean, it's more than, yeah, that's a remnant too. I mean, so these are marginalized people that, you know, in the book of Isaiah, I think it is first chapter, he talks about how, I think how the city he's talking about, I think he's talking about Jerusalem, is like Sodom and Gomorrah because of the ways that they are, they're not bestowing justice upon the widows and the children, the childless or the fatherless children, the orphans. These are the marginalized people that the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites were charged to protect. And so it just makes sense that we look for the marginalized. These are who knows if they're widows, but a lot of these women in these impoverished conditions, their husbands leave them. They'll migrate into a whole other town kilometers away because that's where the better job is, but they don't make enough money for their wife and children to come with them. So the women are essentially fending for themselves. And I guess so that's a stretch of what the term widow means. It's not the original intent of that word, but my application of the widows and orphans are this class of marginalized people that we are to care for. And this is one of them. 1.25 billion, 1.25 billion adults and children with periods have no access to safe and private toilets. This 1.25 billion is the population size of India. If you think about the population size of India, that amount of people having no access to safe or private toilets so they can clean out their rags. So for a guy to have to deal with these gut punches, that's just a superficial physical equation that I'm painting. So now there's a deeper level of this physical experience that the female biologically female people are dealing with is just blood coming out of their undercarriage. So there's a problem that needs to be solved. And for women, how they've dealt with this is by keeping that area clean, but also like being sent out of the town, out of their town that they live in, because the people within their town think if these menstruating people are going to touch food or walk into a public space, they have brought their curse with them. There was I think it's in Nepal that I saw this elder said that if a woman comes into a house and she's menstruating, that means that a tiger is going to come into the house and eat everybody. This is what they're scared of. And this was a fairly recent, I think it was like Vice News documentary type news story. And it was, these myths, these taboos, these stigmas have just hung around far too long. Obama went to Kenya, I think it was in 2017. No, it was before Trump, of course. So that would have been 2000. Oh my gosh, why is my brain not working with math? It was 5 years ago that the YouTube video said that it was. So 5 years from now would be, my brain just whatever. That would be 16. So that would been before Trump got elected. But so Obama is in Kenya and he's talking to this group of people in this huge auditorium, and he's telling the people of Kenya and the world, because it's recorded, that there is no place in the 21st century for people for civilizations, for cultures who think of their women as dirty, who mutilate their genitals, it's called female circumcision, and it's a process that happens when a girl gets her period and she's ready to be wed, and oftentimes or sometimes children are sold essentially to men old enough to be their grandfathers, and they have no say. They have no say whatsoever. And Obama just destroys their thinking, not their thinking, but their backwards approach to the females in general, and not just females, because I would consider either trans or queer individuals who don't fit in with the men would kind of go and fit in to be called or be considered a woman as well. Not by their tribe, just in my mind. But these are all things that a lot of people have to shed, their cultural conditioning, their myths, and deconstruct why things have just been put in place, been the rules for as long as it has been, and we can't really address this female or this period problem, not anything to do with females, but we can't address this period problem until true equality is found, because we can give women pads and tampons all we want to, but do they have private toilets that they can use, or do they live where they share a house or a bathroom with multiple families or multiple people, to where oftentimes these girls, these women, are subjugated to scenarios of rape because of the shunning that the village or the city does to these people. They will send, I think there was a book put out years ago, maybe a decade or more, called The Red Tent. And it talked about this, and I can't remember the time frame. I want to say it was, well, I don't remember the time frame in which the history was discussed. I have biblical imagery in my mind, but I don't remember if that's as far back as the history went with that. But this book, The Red Tent, talks about how women, now I want to say it was Native American, but so who knows really? That's why there's Google. But women were just sent to this one location. Nepal, the same thing. They have this one location, I think it's called the grotto or something like that, where women go during the time of their periods. It's it's unsheltered practically. I mean, there's very little protection, and they are vulnerable to rape because guys, just anybody who wants to be a predator is going to find those opportunities to be hurtful to another. And this is a situation, or these situations that women face are just rife with opportunities for abuse by others. And so I guess in a way, I mean, this is a really big issue when you look at all the different things that that are really at play. You know, so we've got to help women or individuals going through menstruation find a safe place, and I think that just starts with them standing up for themselves more, having allies within the male gendered population who say, I am a feminist too. I am agreeing with the need to bring equity into society and to have these safety measures afforded to women, no matter what they're going through. And we need to do our best to help, just to help support them wherever they are. Male alliance is needed. Kaija, do you want to give the other comment that you put up? I wasn't able to read all that you posted.
Oh, hello. I was just saying that
Hey.
like Old Testament verses can be used to belittle a woman's menstruation, like when there's a verse that speaks about Israel's disobedience being compared to a menstrual cloth. And
Oh,
it just
yeah.
kind of makes me think about, how that can kind of be taken to an extreme, and then women can be looked at in a belittling or, kind of filthy way, just because of that, comparison.
That's a very good point. And that's also parts of the misperception, the misinformation that we're having to battle against to help dispel. But the last bit of data from that UN Women chart says 526 million people, again, we're talking about adults and children with periods. That's my words. They use the word women and girls, being a little bit more inclusive, or at least, I don't know, it might be silly to you, but to me it's helpful until it's just effortless. But 526 million don't have any toilets at all. No running water. They have to go out to fetch their water, or a whole bunch of other scenarios. But 526 million is the population size of the UK, the United States, and Mexico combined. I mean, we've got a lot to work on, kids. But so now I'm going to check the time. Just slide the last half of my presentation into 5 minutes.
Yeah, you can go. You're okay.
We believe in you. You can do it.
You have a little
Thank
bit.
you. So I wanted to share with you guys the kind of the results of this, the data collection that I asked for input on. But I framed it in the question of, if the 12 disciples had periods, because there were 12 individuals that either I reached out to or that voluntarily shared information. And so of these 12, I thought, okay, well, I'll just say that that's a numerical representation of Christ's disciples, right? There were 12 then, there are 12 now. Let's see if we can use this as a study, to just as a parable to illustrate, a random selection of people that make up the disciples, the male disciples of Jesus' time. if roles were reversed, what would they have to experience? If the 12 disciples had periods, what would they have to experience? And this is a list of these are all the different things that I found either in the UN, the UN Women's the chart that Penny shared, or different things that the participants offered up that were the things that they dealt with, or different things that I just ran across from other people's input from other videos or whatnot. But of all the experiences they had, I was able to chart their experiences. I don't even know what this chart form is called. I think it's just a spread, data spread. But these numbers are placed where they are because of this scale, this ranking that I kind of devised of, what their experience is of whatever that is, of pain, discomfort, any of these, nuisances that they had to experience, from a scale of 0 to 10, of 10 being kill me now, 0 being easy breezy, no issues whatsoever, little inconvenience. This is where approximately, my estimate of, like, okay, number 7 might be able to be placed. Where's 7? Since I said that right there. So they had a pretty easy experience overall. The first person that I labeled as the first is she had, she reported no problems, no issues whatsoever. It was like it didn't affect her life is kind of the impression that I was getting, to which I say, well, but let's consider that there is some effect upon your life. But I just went with what the participants responded, not my not my input or judgment on things. So the 12 disciples would have a similar spread, we'll say. There's not a grouping, so not all of the participants in the study said that they were easy breezy experiences with their periods. Not all of them were about to die type of experience. And it was really interesting just to see how the most consistent thing that everybody who no longer has a period, every single one says that they're so thankful. And the ones that had very little pain or very little complication, how blessed they were. And it's a little side detour, because I want us to I think it's important that we be mindful of our wording, of like only this realm being a blessing, only very little pain being a blessing, because I guess in my thinking and my logic, God doesn't bless only on sunny days. There's a blessing in it all. It's just a matter of what we want to make of our own experiences. I mean, I guess that's what it boils down to for me anyway, is, just like number 11, she was just so excited, not so excited, but so celebratory of her period, and actually really sad to have lost it, or to have menopause begin, because it was just such a beautiful experience for her. And number 6 over here had a very, very different experience where, regular embarrassments, just painful, and it dramatically impacted her life. And so what would the disciples experience if they were to have periods? They would experience some level, from 0 to kill me now, of embarrassment, of public shame, the feeling of needing to keep this a secret, keep my period to myself, some level of discomfort, discrimination, of taboos placed, so creating code words for the period instead of talking about it in general, instead of naming it. Women have also said, oh, my Aunt Flo's in town, or I've got a code red, or well, you guys can read it on, it's on the UN Women's thing. It's more involved than just a few of those, but they're sent out of town on some level, where they're kept out of certain spaces. When a woman had their period, they were no longer able to access this part of the community, or this part of their, like, the swimming pool, or any portion of their life they were kept from enjoying because of their period. Additional laundry would need to be done. The disciples would have to take their blood-soaked rags that they've had to fashion out of strips of cloth, and several times a day go and wash them. And I'd have to be away from everybody, of course. So this would take, the disciples' whole lives, if they were menstruating, would have been a completely different experience. They would have been kept out of the pools. So the pool of Siloam, the disciples would not have been able to go there if they were on their period. Painful or unwanted sexual experiences. So some women are, not really given a choice to opt out of sex, or they at least haven't yet felt confident or comfortable enough to say no, or you need to respect my body, and I don't feel like doing this. Some men they don't understand, and I think, again, this is kind of making society conform to a man's way of doing things. Says, oh, of course you can have sex, you're not able to have kids right now, let's go for it. And that's one of my scenarios for what would be the draw for men to have sexual encounters with women during this time. But as Parminder pointed out last Sabbath, that's not a safe, it's not a reliable birth control, having sex during the menstruation cycle. But the disciples would also be experiencing some level of limited employment, because a lot of employers don't want to hire women. They're thought of as not hard workers. They, especially during their period, they have a lot of excuses, from seen from outside, and not able to do certain tasks, or just not able to do things that would be equally afforded to men. They'd be subject to misinformation, just like saying that tampons take your virginity, or, that's not the term, but using tampons for early menstruating, or just any time of a menstrual cycle for the lifetime of a person would be, this was just ingrained in a lot of us throughout our lives, the stigma, this misinformation of don't use a tampon because you'll lose your virginity. It will rupture the hymen. It will make you not a virgin anymore. And so that's misinformation. There's so much more misinformation that you guys can pull together from your own research. But they'll also have to experience some level of menopause. That brings with it a whole other level of inconsistency with your flow, or your cycle gets really weird sometimes, or the hot flashes. There's a whole other set of bodily physiology that is affected during this time of menopause that they would have to undergo at some level of their experience. They would also have to endure jokes being made about them. There would be a stigma, of oh, look at those bleeders. They're, see them walk away to their red tents, and have some kind of joke associated with, demeaning or putting down anyone with their period. There's also a negative effect on school attendance, because either there's painful experiences, or there's an incident where you have to go and change your clothes and you have to miss school, or there's a whole bunch of scenarios where school is affected for those with periods. Again, it leaves you wide open. Now your body is able to start preparing for child rearing, child habiting, I guess, creating a home for a child in your growing uterus. After the period, now you have a whole other set of worries. If somebody were to rape you as a child, as you start your period and you get pregnant, does that mean that you can continue to go to school? Most do not. There's more now because concessions have been made, but in the time of the disciples, you never heard of women in school. So with the disciples, if they had periods, would they have gone to rabbinical school, or whatever school they had at the time? Probably not. They would have to endure unsupported labor laws, like I said, the threat of rape, and also having to pretend to act normal. That was what one of the participants said, was that this whole process of the period for them was just pretending to act normal, like, nothing is wrong with me, everything's fine, just going to get through the day as best as I can. This is a form of self-abuse, if I'm being bold in saying so. Pretending to act normal is invalidating your own experience. And that's something that only a person can control. But as somebody who has, spent a lot of her life pretending to act normal, I get that. And I think that you can get that without having to have the experience of menstruating. But another resource is www.thebleedread.com. That was a great I barely got into one of the, it's a blog. It's a really great resource that is, it was helpful for me to read of these experiences to get a wider framework of people's experiences other than my own, to see what women all throughout the world have to endure, have to conform to in order to just have but I'm back on just in time to close, unless anybody has questions.
Can I make a comment, Sister Alyssa? This is Lana.
Please.
Happy Sabbath.
Hi, Lana. Yes, thank you. Happy
I
Sabbath.
was, you know, this last presentations about the menstruations and, you know, the experiences and just generally our view on LGBT people. You know, it comes to my mind the words of Ellen White where she says that health reform is the right hand of the third angel's message. And I think, you know, when we talk about nature of man, that leads to understanding of the nature of the LGBT people, that leads to understanding of our own experience of womanhood, right? Or, you know, our experience with menstruation. I think it has everything to do with the third. I mean, it's not just everything, it is the definition of the third angel's message is truly the right hand of the third angel's message. And if we remember, she says that that's the one that's gonna bring people into the, you know, that will convert people into, you know, into saving relationship with God. So if this is something that when, you know, it's just, it becomes so profoundly, this isn't simply the third angel's message, how, you know, in the past in the Adventism is being defined as, you know, change, reform, you know, food, you know, diet reform and lifestyle and clothes reform. This isn't just the diet, lifestyle, clothes is nature of man, and it's nature, and it provides you with understanding of the all what is the personhood is, right? Whether you're on one side of the on the extreme sides of the you know, spectrum, or you're somewhere in between. And I think that this is just such a blessing, because it's like complete, it's even more profound, it's even more truer than even when we just used to be like thinking about the third angel's message as being food reform or lifestyle reform, because it's actually it's truly it digs down into our nature, into our experience of, you know, with something so very often, like you know, in many cultures, many societies, you know, that's considered as something taboo, right? Related to embarrassment, and we're not encouraged to talk about it, right? So I think that's just, yeah, I thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation.
I'm happy to kind of, I don't know, picked up on as soon as Parminder made this the last topic of his Q&A last Sabbath, it stuck with me as something of, I guess, kind of like when Elder Tess was speaking or teaching in the continent of Africa. I can't remember if it was Zimbabwe or somewhere else, but about the time when the light on equality in wearing pants, it was very evident, like, okay, this is the direction to go, and time to start wearing pants. And when Parminder said this last week, it was, okay, it's time to start talking about menstruation and normalizing it in conversation. And you know, maybe I'm taking things too sensitively or being too sensitive about this, but when those two people, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but two people left the Bible chat after you know, I guess some discussion of menstruation was going on, and thought, you know, I think that's part of our fear of not talking about it too. It's like, oh, well, we don't want to step on your toes. We don't, you know, sorry for bringing up such a topic that you guys probably need to have more exposure to this, and you're leaving rather than, you know, digging in, or maybe they left because of totally different reasons. But I am so grateful to all those who did participate. Lana, I appreciate you saying that it was a blessing. It's a blessing to bless others, and so that I think that's kind of the gift of giving too. Is like, you know, there's always, you feel better after you do it. So it's like that encouragement to keep on doing it. But the any other questions or comments?
I've been wanting to say something. I talked to you, I met you at the 2019 Arkansas camp meeting. Don't know if you remember.
Okay. We sat next to each other at lunch.
Yeah. And you said something, I said something to you, and maybe we were talking about baptism or something. I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about. 2 years ago. But I was going through something at that point in time. I was going through premenopause. Okay. I didn't know. I don't know what the heck. Yeah. But I had a health issue going on. And you mentioned earlier about one of the things some women deal with along their life's journey, heavy bleeding and stuff like that. Well, that was going on with me. I went through that for it was the whole month of March. Okay. And eventually I figured out how to deal with it. But it was still kind of going on at the time I was down there in Arkansas. And I just didn't go because of it. I shared this with a member of the, Lambert Fellowship group down there. And I was actually chastised for it afterwards by another member. But anyway, I went through this whole experience of, I'm down here, this is going on, and I'm going to try to keep this secret. And it does. It disrupts your life. You never know what's going to happen, and you never know what point in your life you're going to go through something like that. Turned out I had a fibroid tumor. Wasn't real big or anything, but that may have led to some of that. And there may have been other things going on, like estrogen levels too high, and all these things I had to figure out. Yeah. And so, memories of all this have been drummed up while you've been, talking about all this. Yeah. And we all knew what the atmosphere was. And yet I was freely talking about certain things at those lunch tables that some people, I think, were uncomfortable about. Just like I went and shared with a member of the Lambert Fellowship about what was going on, and only because of certain circumstances. It's not like I sat at the table and started blaring out about all this, but just personally, I shared it with somebody. Anyway, so I was going through some stuff, and then 2 years later, I ended up going through menopause, and so I kind of, my body was just all messed up at the time, and I almost didn't go down there. But you know what? At the time, my understanding was I could get baptized if I went down there, and things were starting to change, and they were starting to make up new rules about it, and how you had to go through baptismal study. But I went down there with this in mind. That was kind of like my anchor thought that, these issues are going on, and I don't know, and then that's an issue. That was an issue for me too. How am I going to get baptized? Sure. So this is a very disruptive thing, and it can be way more disruptive when things go really wrong. with
Yeah.
your whole, hormonal situation later in life.
Yeah.
You could be normal, and I was normal for 30 whatever years, not even pain.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, spot on every month,
Hmm.
normal, nothing unusual, no late this or that or whatever. And
Yeah.
so what you go through later in life with that whole premenopause thing is another story in and of itself.
Sure.
And when menopause hits, for some of us, it's like you hit a brick wall hard.
Yeah.
And you think it's going to be great because you don't have to deal with this ant flow anymore.
Right.
So yeah, women, we got the short end of the stick, not only because of what we have to go through, but because we're treated like pariahs or something, like, oh, don't ever dare talk about this.
Sure.
Well,
And I think that's, we're seeing the contrast. We're seeing how, so those taboos, those desires to separate anything to do with, probably talking about yourself in general at those camp meetings, but also, certain topics just in society, not even as Adventists, just in society. Part of healthy discourse is nothing to do with women's issues with menstruation. That's considered crude, just like telling fart jokes or something. In civilized society, we have these certain rules that you abide by, and it's bad if they get broken, and it's not just bad for you, but it's bad for the whole group. And this is the part of the disinformation, that two streams that that we're still having to fight against, and not so much of the punching type fighting, but just standing. One of the participants said that standing in our truth and our power. Maybe it was I think it was Cedri on the group chat of it's important for women to speak their truth. And before I joined the movement, I had a different interpretation of what that meant, from a probably more of a spiritualistic background of kind of what speaking your truth meant was just speaking your perspective, and especially when speaking your truth about somebody else was what a lot of people interpreted speaking your truth meant. When Cedric stated, this is speaking our truth. This is how we fight against this form of repression, this form of subjugation, is that we have to stand our ground and say, well, we might have thought that was okay then, or we might have allowed that type of behavior or ostracization of us, but that's not okay anymore. We've grown out of that, and I think real problems are going to be solved through just that simple, very, very meek, mild process of just not backing down, not yielding to those authoritarian streams of information. And so I appreciate, Linda, your sharing, but that catch-22 of it's having these flashback memories are sometimes difficult to deal with, but I really am glad that that you shared that, just for just the sake of expressing it, of getting it out of a confined space within us, and out into a space where, okay, we can finally let that go. We don't have to hold on to that anymore. That doesn't have to be our experience anymore. We can choose to have a totally different experience now. And I really pray that that's what everybody chooses on a daily basis, to re-emphasize this equality for women. I'm just seeing who, oh, Linda, you sent that. I'm seeing, oh, Tiffany. No, that's Taisha. I can't read your message, Taisha, so if you see.
You just muted yourself.
I just muted. Okay, Taisha, I couldn't read your last message. If you want to speak that out. The sorry, not sorry was the only thing that I could see.
Okay, take that earpiece out. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that, you know, at times it was tough, you know, with the porta potties and skirts.
Porta potties.
And if you had like, if you had your menstrual and you had to go in there, then that would make things even more tough. So I guess now, you know, I'm glad like the conversation is had, because now, you know, things like that can be taken into consideration. And then, you know, in hindsight, you can see like, oh wow, you know, that must have been tough for them to go through, you know, at times.
Yeah.
So like going forward, like you said, you know, it's like now, you know, you can like add some consideration to the experience. And
Yep.
yeah.
Well, and I think that's going to lead to maybe a different restyling of the porta potties, you know, I mean, or at least, I don't know, maybe just different disposable things in there. But yes, definitely consideration and just problem solving, working through, and not you know, saying, oh, this one thing is going to fix it all. I think we need to be, and I'm not necessarily talking with you guys listening now, but as far as like the people in the world who are capable of making decisions and you know, making changes to certain processes and policies, I think we're going to need to adjust to each situation, and you know, and really, and not be stubborn about concessions. You know, the give and take of, well, no, I demand it to be this way, because that's being a man in a man's world. Being a woman in a man's world is, you know, it's listening. It's, okay, let's understand how we can solve this together. Let's cooperate. You know, there's a whole new world to imagine, and you know, and I think we all have different opportunities within our lives, even if we're retired, you know, to reach out to whoever we come in contact with, you know, at an appropriate time, not just like, you know, accosting everybody in the grocery store. How's your menstruation? You know, do you feel safe? You know, not necessarily like that, but, you know, doing what we can. And I think different people are going to be charged with different, you know, there's going to be division of labor, right? There's going to be different people that feel they just grab a hold, like I grabbed a hold of this topic. There are going to be people that grab a hold of other topics. While I'm on that of, you know, grabbing people on for this project, I do want to thank Jaquetta and Christiane Ambrose. I don't think I'm spelling or pronouncing her last name correctly. Ambrose, Lana, Susie, Stacey Ann, Sakai, Soraya, Tiffany, Raquel, Edita, and Cedri. And myself, I was the 12th person in the study. But I want to thank everyone who participated. I think this is just the start of something bigger, and maybe the focal point of equality, where, you know, everything else kind of hinges off of, branches off. But that's all I got so far. Does anybody else have anything else to add or questions or?
I do. I want to add
Yes.
something. Yes. I think about this topic as how we thought about mental illness and how taboo it was to even mention that in well, Christianity in general, but especially in this movement, and how, you know, even the world, we've seen how it's broken that whole wall of separation down, and how progressive we're getting with that, especially in this movement where, you know, we are all dealing with something different. And though menstruation is a woman's issue, quote unquote, right? Where we're the ones that's going through it, even though there are males who have menstrual cycles as well. You know, it's mainly a woman's issue. But the thing is, it affects everybody around a female when she has her menstrual cycle, just like mental illness affects everybody around that person that has it. And so instead of looking at it as a female issue or whatever the gender issue is, it should be looked upon as it's a issue on a whole. And with saying that, I see how Christ is working and how he's molding our minds and shaping it for us to see how he sees us. And the love that's coming through understanding these issues, that is not just Stacey Ann's issue or Alyssa's issue is, as a female issue, is an issue across the board. Because if I can get the help that I need and on my menstruation, then it was gonna affect us on an overall basis. I will be more effective, be able to do my work more effectively. And so everyone benefits from it. So I'm happy that these conversations are being had, and we have to look at it as not just a female issue. It's an issue that all of us need to deal with.
Thank you for saying that, because I still felt like I was saying women and girls far too much, and even the UN literature was, gender specific. And you're absolutely right. Menstrual health is a societal issue. Maybe societal is not necessarily the right term, but on a community level, on a global level, it's a huge economy of the period related products is a good chunk anyway of the gross domestic product of nations. There's, childcare is something too that kind of falls in that category. We can springboard into sexual health for women. Well, for both men and women, actually, because men need to know these rules also. They need to know, men need to know, well, we all need to know what's going on with everybody else. So men need to know what's going on with women, or those who identify as women, those who have, not even that, who identify as women, because that excludes the trans. And so there is I love how you said that everybody, that this does impact everybody. I don't think I emphasized that enough, so I'm really glad that you said.
Yeah, I had a thought also, and it's basically been said, but I like how you put it, because it is a community issue. And I like how you put it earlier, because if you take the scenario when you said earlier that we live in a male-dominated society and we built things around men. So, and I had the thought earlier when you had said that about me being in the military. I know we have a few people on here who've been in the military before. And let's say you have to fix a part that comes in and you have to fix something, and it comes in and you have a time frame and to fix this part. And the time frame is built upon a man's ability to get it done, because basically there's never ever a hindrance that would come up, because there's always a man available, because we have nothing that would prevent us from being there. And so if a woman came in and she was on her menstruation, she was having this gut pain, wasn't able to do her part to fix that, whatever that came in the allotted time, because of this pain, then everybody would be looking at her and they would say, well, look, the women cannot finish this. We've noticed this pattern. So, but the crazy part about that, in this male-dominated society, for a man to look at a woman and say, look at the women, they don't work as fast as us. We can look at that man and be like, dude, do you realize you would not be here if it was not for a woman? You know, so when we built these constraints to do things in society, you cannot build it upon a man's time frame, because it doesn't work like that. The world does not revolve around men. So if you want like and I know it's only going to happen in heaven, but if you want a healthy cycle to get things done, because in heaven we're going to be doing all kinds of things. It's going to be so wonderful, but heaven is going to be built upon a system that is fair, that it works and it's pleasing. It's a healthy type of whatever we're going to be doing there, you know. But here on earth, it's going to always be somebody getting put down, somebody's being oppressed, somebody's being made to feel that they cannot do things, somebody's getting put down. So I think that what you said earlier was so profound about being in a male-dominated society. And I know that's been said a million times, but it really hit me today when you look at, like, you know, something getting accomplished in the workplace. So I really appreciated that thought.
Uh-oh.